Hello and welcome to my channel, and thank you so much for tuning in. It means a lot to me. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing and hit the notification bell. I know that my videos are no longer actually popping up anywhere, and I have had a few people telling me that the notification bell has been switched off on their streaming service or on their platform towards mine. So we are definitely living in the age of censorship. This is a very different video, and I just wanted to share with you that I will be coming back on camera shortly. So please bear in mind, I had to relocate, and I haven't been able to do much filming because I've been so busy with all of the other things that I do, and also just the level of readings that come in. I also have to control the level of things that are coming in at me. Walking this path is, at a lot of the time, very, very overwhelming, and burnout can happen very, very easily. So perhaps I'll do another video at some point talking about what it's like to walk the path of a mystic and try to be as authentic as you can in a world that crushes authenticity and has false narratives about authenticity being something that isn't actually authentic at all. So today I wanted to talk about something that is very random, and it is about a place that exists within Australia. So if you are an Australian person and you know about this location, more pertaining to Perth, Western Australia, then you may already know about this. I went on to YouTube and had a look, and there were no videos, of course, of this nature on this place. And I know that some people are going to freak out, or they might be quite offended, but that's not really any of my concern. I'm just sharing my findings here about what I found. So I'm going to take you back and tell you about something that happened to me just over the last couple of years. I can't go into legal matters or names, but I can share with you a place that is cursed. And so I'm going to, as a mystic, it's kind of like on me to talk about this. All right. So in this world, there are different places. Obviously, I've learned different people incarnate in different time, spaces, and places for different reasons. And when you travel and you go to different parts of the country, and particularly those that travel internationally frequently, you will know that there are different vibes. There are different frequencies of places. And those souls, souls live in different places for different reasons. So you could be going from one side of Australia, for example. I went from very green, lush Victoria. I grew up in, if you don't know Australia, Victoria is a suburb down the bottom in the east. And I was down in the southeast. I grew up in a very small little town. I think it only had like 8,000 to 13,000 population back when I was a kid. Now it's way bigger now, but I grew up in kind of like in a snowy town at the bottom of Mount Buller. So if you know where Mount Buller is, you'll know the town. That's where I grew up originally, and I also lived around areas within the Yarra Valley, like Wodonga, Albury, Wangaratta, and lived and was quite frequently visiting places like Shepparton. So if you know any of these places, hello, leave a comment below and say hey, because it's like, when someone knows where you come from, they know, right? So only a couple of years ago, I made a very big jump. It was about a year and a half ago now. It's gone so quick. I was ready to leave Melbourne. I could see where Melbourne was heading. I can see where certain cities within the world are heading. And being the way that I am, it's a blessing. Being psychic and being intuitive is the biggest blessing a human can ever have, because everything is hyper boost, like boosted, if you know what I mean. It's a double-edged sword. Same with being a real creative person, like a real artist. You have to feel everything. You have to, so it's a double-edged sword. So everything hurts differently. Everything hits differently, right? Everything's magnified. So you get the beauty of seeing, knowing, feeling, thinking, and really, being able to go into these types of places mentally and spiritually. And then you get the sword that swings the other way, which is, it hurts. It's very, very, very painful to live here in this world, as we're kind of starting to really move into that Orwellian timeline. So yeah, I made the jump. I was ready to leave Melbourne. Melbourne is collapsing. Sydney's collapsing. It's all, these major cities are no longer safe at all now, with all of the mass immigration and all of the woke idolization that's starting to happen. It's really taking its foothold now, and we're going to see some very, very heavy duty things happen in the next couple of years. Lots of civil wars are going to start breaking out. So I was like, bump in the road, let's move around the bump. So I got out and I made the jump across from one side of Australia all the way to the other. One of the biggest jumps a person can make, like in terms of travel within their own country. So coming across to Western Australia, it's very much like a different country. It's completely backwards here. I know that some people might get their heckles up on hearing this, but just hear me out. It is so in the past. Okay, so it hasn't got the forward motion. It doesn't have the speed. It doesn't have, because Perth is the most isolated city in the world. And then you've got these little kind of towns, these little sub-towns that are all scattered out down the side of the west coast. It's right down the bottom of Australia. So they haven't been privy to the world on that kind of cultural level. So it's probably 20, 25 years kind of backwards, where the people, they don't have, there's still wokey ideologies here and all of this bullshit, but they don't have, there's no interest in fashion. There's no interest in aesthetically being pretty. It's rough. It's brutal. The people get around bare feet, There's no decorum, there's no manners, there's no respect. The hygiene over here is terrible. It's very cliquey. The people kind of hang out with their friends. Like in Perth, they'll have their high school friends and that's it for their whole life. They won't reach out and make new friends. And a lot of people that live over here in Perth, a lot of them, they don't travel, they don't go anywhere, they never leave it. So they're not culturally open or educated, but that's not me having a go. By the way, this is not me attacking Perth people. Please know that this is not an attack. This is just simple observation. That's what it is. And that's fine. And there's beauty within that. There's a beauty to people that don't have, that they're not controlled by fashion and being woke and being seen as politically correct. That there is beauty in the truth of that, the brutality of that. You get off at the airport and you'll see, it is a very, very low economic, thing over here. But it's different. And, there are pluses and negatives to everything. So if you want to disappear from the rest of the world and you want to be around a place that has stunningly beautiful, beautiful beaches that are not trashed, and the water is beautiful and blue and green, and the sand, and, there's very strong summers over here in Western Australia, then this is the place for you. Okay, but if you are very fast-paced and you can't handle waiting more than 20 minutes for a lukewarm cup of coffee, then this is not going to work out for you at all. That's why a lot of people come over to the West, and with a lot of the low job opportunities and the rest of it, and the people, they just can't assimilate and they end up going back over to the East. Totally understandable. So that being said, when I came across, I ended up in a suburb in Perth that is haunted. So it's so interesting being this way inclined and just wanting to share how this works and how my findings of it, because I feel like I can articulate this. So if you know about the suburb of Armadale in Perth, if you know about this suburb, then please, I'd love to hear your comments below. Don't be shy. You can totally disagree with me. You can say whatever you want. I don't delete any of these comments, but I'm just sharing with you that this last couple of years, like, I've gone through a lot of transformational things in my life that have really destroyed me. Really, really dark nights of the soul type of thing, like suicidal ideation every day. I'm a gay man. I'm a gay man with a mind. I challenge the status quo. I'm not woke. I'm not pro-Palestine. I think for myself. I'm very much into the occult and spirituality, free thinking, questioning authority. So this is not coming from some pretentious bullshit. This is just me explaining to you how this came to be and what it felt like. Because it was the first time that I'd ever experienced something so spiritually oppressive. So if you don't know, in Australia, we're not, when I say we, obviously not me, but when Australia was colonized and settlers came, convicts came, they came to Australia, they took over this country. They started to create their own regulations. A lot of that came from obviously Britain. A lot of colonizers came. They also built prisons here over in WA. The Fremantle prisons and all the rest of it. And so a lot of convicts came, and Australia was founded and built from nothing, literally. Like, there were Aboriginal people here, of course, the native indigenous people. If you know the history of colonialism, you know how the world works. All cultures are built on top of other cultures. It's just what humans do. Same with the Native American Indians. It's just what happens. It's terrible, but that's what it is. And so a lot of frequencies of oppression, a lot of frequencies of, so getting a little bit esoteric, when a lot of energy is released, a lot of dark energy is released, those frequencies stay in a place. So energy has memory. All right, that's when I do psychometry, when I was doing face-to-face readings, when someone brings an item, or even better if they bring what in the witch world, what we call a tag lock, which would be even maybe a piece of their hair. Sometimes I've tried to use, people have brought me cigarette butts that someone sucked on, pieces of DNA. All of this stuff has codes. Energy has a code and a frequency. All right, so when war happens, when genocide happens, when slavery happens, when any level of mass levels of energy is released into an area or into a space in doesn't matter where it is in the world, it lingers. It has a frequency, and that frequency is power. So energy has memory, and it sits wherever it sits. So you will know that in Brazil, in every culture in the world has areas that contain spiritual frequencies. Some of them are tied to deities, gods, religions, and some of them are from where rituals have been performed. I know there's very specific places in New Orleans that are haunted. Australia also has a lot of places here that are actually haunted as well. So I could go on and on with like haunting and all the rest of it. We've got Port Arthur. We know that that's a very, very famous place, Van Diemen's Land down in Tasmania. A lot of hauntings, a lot of trapped souls that are still there. So obviously when people are rounded up and they're made into slaves, or they're drove off the edge of cliffs, or they're raped or separated, all of this anxiety, all of this energy is a frequency that lingers. Much like if you've ever seen the film The Grudge, I think that's probably a really good... I think that film, like, I think it was called Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not sure. If you know the name, I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly, but if you know the name, it's about a man that was very angry and he killed his wife and son in this house, and then, he, in a fit of rage, all of this frequency was released. So what I've learned about spirits and energies and frequencies is that a spirit is a form of a human, or it could be something from another realm that lingers. All right. So usually when we talk about ghosts, we're talking about a human spirit that has crossed over, semi-crossed over. So they're not all the way over back in the astral realm. So they're kind of here in this purgatory state. I did talk about this the other day, answering a question from a client that asked me, and I made a video on it. There are levels within going back to the astral world. So I did mention that, for example, when a soul suicides, the soul doesn't get to, usually, depending on the circumstances, there's variables, of course, the soul doesn't go back immediately to the astral realm. They have to live out the time that they would have lived here, that they were allotted here in this time-space reality, here until that time is completed. Then they get to cross. Okay, that's if there's a suicide involved. But of course, there's variables. I'm trying to summarize this, right? So when we look at locations, if certain events have taken place around these locations, for example, the one that I'm going to talk about and share with you my findings in a minute, then those frequencies are still echoing and they're trying to attach to things. And that is what we call an entity. All right. So residual energy can form its own consciousness if things attach to it. That's why I've learned when angry ghosts, like angry spirits, will attract angry people. All right. So frequencies, when it comes to the law of vibration or the law of resonance, is that same recognizes same. Things that are not equal cannot connect, not in a pure sense. They can connect, but not on a level that where same sees itself eye to eye. I've mentioned this as well with star signs. Like when I meet a person that is like triple, like a stellium Sag, it's like meeting a part of myself. It's really interesting. When I meet people that are like Aries sun, Aries moons, my areas, like I see them very clearly. Like it's like finding a part of yourself in someone else. That's like astrological frequencies. But this is what I'm talking about here. This is not an astrological frequency. This is a frequency of something far more sinister. And so when I came to Perth, WA, it's a culture shock. You're trying to adjust. The people are very different. They're not friendly. They're not warm. They don't say hello in the morning when you walk. They're very reserved, very poor levels of communication. they're very kind of insulated, like, who are you, what do you want, get away from me, that type of thing, which is really a bit of a shock when you come from a place where you talk to people and they say, hey, how you going? There's not a welcomingness. There's a suspected, like, you're treated like a suspect. Like, that's how a lot of the West treats a lot of the other side of Australia, because they know that they've got this beautiful place here. And a lot of them, I think, don't really want a lot of people over here because they want this level of privacy and solitude. And I understand that, because that's what I came here for too. Like, if you wanted to disappear, there's places over here where you could easily disappear, right? So they're very protective. They're a bit skeptical. And so it wasn't until I learned, to not tell people that I came from the other side here, I got treated very differently until I could, assimilate. No offense, Perth people. But if you know anything, there's videos on here you could listen to. I'm sure people have mentioned this as well. Like, it's just a cultural thing, right? So I came to a suburb called Armadale. So it is one of the most violent and economically low parts of Australia. There are other parts within Australia that are also very low, like up in Darwin in the Northern Territory. I think it's like every 30 seconds it's a break-in. It's strange because in Melbourne now, it's every 50 seconds in Melbourne a house is broken into. But here, when I got here, it was just trying to secure myself, get a place, reposition myself and try and heal myself. I'd just gone through this really heavy time in my life back in Melbourne. And, I just it was probably a little bit hastily made, the decision, but it was a decision that needed to be made. I needed a change. So believe me, you can't get more of a change than coming to WA. You really can't. And I ended up in Armadale. And when I got there, it wasn't until the first couple of weeks everything had kind of settled down. My stuff was on a truck, and bringing your stuff across from Melbourne to WA can be about 2 to 3 weeks to get your stuff across. They bring it on a train line on a shipping container. And at the time, there'd been a lot of flooding. There's been a lot of rain here, very heavy wet season over the past couple of years here, where it just will rain for like 3 weeks straight, won't even stop, on and off lightly, and that's just how it is. Then it stops, and then it's like beautiful sun, very hot, dry heat. That's Perth, right? Western Australia. It's not the Garden State. So yeah, it was just me adjusting, finding my feet and getting set up. And then I started to notice something didn't feel right. Like my regulation of my nervous system was still kind of in hyper mode because I just made this move and there were delays with my stuff arriving. So I slept on the floor on a mattress on a lounge room in this old house, and ripped up the carpet in the house because it was so old and filthy. A lot of places here have got that very damp, wet, old, musty smell. They're not new. A lot of places here are very old. They've been here for a long time, particularly out in that area of Armadale. And it wasn't until about 2 or 3 in the morning, obviously the spiritual times around that at night time, this frequency would just start to come through the house and it would wake me up. It was not like a ghost. It was something that was happening around the town, around the suburb, around the houses, around the streets. And it would come in waves. So I'd be like laying in bed and this frequency would just wash over the house. And there is at night time, it's quite interesting actually, say around the same time at night, there is this breeze that comes in over the hills. It's like, I think they call it, there's a word for it, whatever it is that they call it. If you know what they call it, leave it in the comments below. But there's this wind that comes through at nighttime, and it really goes down over the hills, and it like it really picks up, particularly around summertime, right? And it hits the windows and everything starts rattling and shaking. If you've got anything that's down, outside that isn't like tied down, it's going to blow away, like really heavy winds. And because Armadale's kind of right on the outskirts of Perth, so it's right up against all of these hills. And I started to notice this at night, and at first I thought, it's just the wind, and then and it is the wind, but there's something in it. So I would like get up and make myself a cup of tea and just like couldn't sleep or, couldn't settle. But it had this frequency to it. It's very difficult to explain. If you're extrasensory or if you're psychic, if you're very intuitive, then you may know what I'm talking about. And I could hear in the wind people screaming. I could hear screams in the wind. So a lot of the time I'd be like, oh, it's just the wind. And then I'd hear this blood-curdling scream of a woman. And I'd often hear a beat of a drum very lightly in the wind. It very, very interesting. And I'd be like, okay, what? And I'd go outside and like open the window, like, what is this? I didn't understand. And so my nervous system regulated a little bit, and then I was kind of like in work mode. I'm like, let's get a job. Let's, get myself set up. Let's just focus on what I have to do. I've just moved here. And then what started to happen was a very strange series of bad luck events started to happen. So within the first couple of weeks of moving into the house in Armadale, my dog very suddenly got very, very sick. And I took her to the vet and, of course, found out she was full of tumors all throughout her lungs. And she had a tumor the size of a tennis ball inside of her body. So her name was Happy, and she'd been with me for 9 years back in Melbourne. And so Happy got put down. So obviously Happy had to go to sleep because she couldn't, she couldn't breathe. Her lungs were collapsing with fluid, and she was in pain. So that absolutely devastated me. And I fell into a very, very deep depression just because that little dog was my world. And, she was like my world. I've been single for a long time, and to me, she was family. She's like my baby. She's like my child. That dog, I shared so much with her. She was my special one. And, the pain of losing your dog is just beyond. So a series of events started to happen around me, and I started to notice it wasn't just me, it was actually all around this area. At nighttime in Armadale, it's a very high crystal meth amphetamine area as well, very high drug use. It's one of the lowest socioeconomic demographics within Australia. So it's absolutely rough and brutal. And there are quite a few Aboriginal people that walk around in the main street or walk around aimlessly. At nighttime, I would notice people would come out of their houses, and I'm not making this up. People can attest to this. I've got other people that live there, and at times you would see people wandering around at night. They'd be wandering around in the streets, just going off their head, hanging out at the park, walking around. So it's at nighttime, it's like everything in the suburb battened down, tightened down. Everyone locked their windows, barred up. Everything was all barred. And then you would have these kind of people that were in this state of wandering, just aimlessly walking around. And at times I'd had an Eufy camera that was on my front door, and you would see people walking around in the nighttime like they're in a fucking trance, just walking. Like, I'm thinking, this is like early hours of the morning. I'm like, what the hell? Like, you're sleeping all day, you know, you're in a drug den, a crack den, and then you just come out at night and walk around like a vampire. So there was a lot of inverted energies. The homelessness was pretty rough. There were people everywhere trying to like sleep, you know, under trees or sleep in parks. The energy of this place was very, very low. And so what started to happen was things like I would pick up a pen and the pen would be working for, you know, writing a sentence, and then it would suddenly run out of ink. And then it was just a series of events that started to immobilize me. Phone reception in the house would drop out. Now, this was not necessarily a cursed house, which it could have been, because the house I was living in was formerly a crack den. And I was told that people, you know, it was a drug house. So people would come and go all throughout the night. People would even sleep out on the front of the landing of the house, under the eaves, you know, under the roofing at the front. So the house definitely had a history. But me moving into it, I cleansed it. I went over it quite a lot of times to secure myself within the house. But I began to understand it wasn't the house, it was the area. So much negativity and pain and confusion was just washed over this area of this suburb. And when you talk to people, they were just out of it. Like, you talk to, like, it was weird. The thing that it feels like being in a cursed area is, it was like having a wet, thick, it was like having a really wet, thick blanket just put over the top of you. That's the feeling that it felt like. I don't know, like, and then I'd go out of Armadale, right, and everything would be fine. I'd be completely okay. Like, the cloud would lift, the energy would lift, I'd feel like I could think clearly. And then I'd go back to Armadale, and it was like every bit of energy in my body was just sucked out of me. That's the frequency of Armadale. All right, if you know what I'm talking about and you've had cousins that have lived here, or if you've had to live around this area, or I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but it was like being in a haze. The longer that I was there, I couldn't think clearly. Like, I'd have a thought of something that I was doing that day, and then it was like this force would knock it off course. Like, I'd have a list of things to get through, and I'd get through the first couple, and then I'd forget where the list was. So I was in this kind of, under a spell, like under a haze of forgetfulness and frustration and confusion. And like, I was able to check my regulation of my emotions, and so I'd see something on TV or I'd see something around me. By the way, there were lots of attacks while I was there. I was attacked 3 times while I was living there. And I'd go to the shopping center. In the first couple of weeks of being there, I was going up these escalators, and as I was coming downwards from doing some shopping to leave the car park, there was all this blood all over the ground in the shopping center. And as I got down to the bottom of the escalators, there were about 5 police officers on top of a man who was just screaming, and there was just blood everywhere. And I was wearing thongs at the time, and basically had to step over and walk past, and I'm literally stepping in someone else's blood under my feet. And I was slippering and sliding kind of around, trying to hold onto the wall as I walked past. It was hell. It was hellish. I feel very sad, and I'd be very worried for anyone that has to live in this area. I think that if you are living in this area now and you can't get out of there, I don't know what to say to you. Like, maybe this has been your home and you don't know any different, but from an occult point of view, the frequency of this area was hopelessness, just absolute despair, and this feeling of having no future, the feeling of hell, like being trapped on a loop that you'll never get out of. I have traveled the world and gone to other places. I have shared some experiences about traveling to China and going outside into the outer proverbs. That was really intense as well, energetically, from a spiritualist point of view. Lots of checkpoints and men with razor wire, machine guns, blocking areas, all that type of thing. But this was different. The hopelessness, the confusion, the energy, it's so low and scrambled. So there's this frequency in Armadale of being scrambled. It's like your brain got put in a fucking blender. The only time I've ever experienced that level of something fucking with my brain on a spiritual level was when I was in my early 20s and I did a seance with some friends to try and connect to a demon, and the frequency of the demon came through and started to fuck with us in our head. How could you be so stupid? But the frequency of it was like my brain, while I was living in Armadale, was like being put in a blender. It was just spinning, scrambled, chaotic. It was like someone had changed the channel. You know, when you're back in the day, you grew up in the 90s or the 80s, sometimes you would change a channel. This is maybe even before the remote, but the remote was invented. You change a channel and it's shh, and it's just all this static. It's gray and white and black, and it's all shh. That is the right there. That's the perfect frequency description of this area. And so I was there for a couple of months, and after realizing what was happening, I started to figure out, was this something that was happening in my house, or was this something that was happening in the area? So I got the tools that I need. I do tarot readings. I do readings all the time. I do psychic readings, mediumship. I do, all this. I'm an occultist, so I'm not going to run away from it. I'm going to try and connect with it. And so I sat down, I prepared a space, I did some fasting. I even managed to get, it was very feral. Sorry, excuse me, I've just woken up. My voice is a bit strange, but my voice. I can't talk this morning. I need another coffee. But yeah, I ended up, it was very feral. So I ended up getting a bathtub from a junkyard. As an artist, by the way, none of this is me being a pretentious person. This is just me sharing my findings, right? I was rough. I was roughing it. I was making the best of it. I found something on the side of the road. I painted. I'm an artist, so I'm not pretentious. I love to create and make things with my hands, and I find scraps of things in op shops and I put them together, and it's just part of my nature, right? This is not a social thing where I'm looking down on people. I'm sharing. I was in the thick of it, right? I'm with all of the addicts and everything. I'm in it. I've got a friend who used to live in Hell's Kitchen. He used to tell me stories in New York. Very interesting man. But yeah, so I got a bathtub and I filled it up with water from the hose, and I would just sit in the water, which is really awesome when it's really, really hot, because the heat of Armadale, it could get up to 48 degrees. I'm not sure in American terms what that would be in Fahrenheit, but it's very, very hot, very still, very hot. So the sun and the heat just sucks all of the energy out of you. So, all of your motivation is just drops off a cliff. And the people there were very demonic looking as well. I'm going to say that. I'm just saying it, very distorted facial features, very lost. The looks on their faces, very gaunt, or very fat, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of stuff. very weird looking people. I don't know. Like, I don't want to be mean, but I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to share what I found. I could see energetically the frequency was affecting the people, and it still is. Like, it's there. So they'd be like really skinny and rat looking, like bones sticking out of their chest, or they'd be like overtly obese, where that huge, like very extreme looking energies with the people as well. Yeah. So there were a series of things that started to happen as well. Just mentioning, like, pipes would burst in the house, sewage problems, the smell of sewage was coming up through the house. There were a lot of problems with the house that I got that were covered up before I got there. So I had to deal with all of this. But seriously, in all honesty, a lot of the resources that I had all went into securing the house. And then I couldn't kind of, you can't, it's like you're stuck in a hole and you can't get out. Every move that you make, it's like you're sinking deeper. And so I would go and talk to the locals. I'd talk to the people and talk about their life and go to the park and just sit around and talk to people. Everyone was having this very similar experience, this similar story. So that's when I prepared a little ritual, and I sat on the ground and I got some chalk, just working with what you have. This is what you do as a spiritualist. You don't need much. You're the vessel. So I was like, I'm going to try and get to the bottom of this. So I grabbed a bit of chalk and I drew a circle on the ground at night, lit some candles, and really started to channel into the frequency of what was happening. What I got shown was an Aboriginal elder was standing at the front of my house, and he was, I don't know if it was a male or female. I thought it was a man to start with, but I don't know. But it was Aboriginal. I could hear the sticks, the clicking of the sticks, and he was showing me the hills above my house. So up in Armadale, there's these hills, and I think what he was showing me was something happened up there. That's what I was being shown. Like, I don't know whether it was a group of Aboriginal people that were drove off the edge of a cliff. I don't know if they were just all lined up and shot. I don't know. But he's showing me like mass suffering. That's what was starting to come through. Mass suffering on a really heavy level. And it was like the Aboriginal elders of this area, the despair and the, how they've been treated and all the rest of it. It's like very much like the Native American Indians. They curse the land that has been taken over. I know there's also some areas within WA around Pinjarra, which I was told about by a friend. And when that word came up, if you're listening now and you know the story, like, hey, I know because you're the one who we're talking about this, is that a few people in WA know about certain spots around WA which are what is considered cursed land. So the Aboriginals are like, you took over our land, you fucking took our women, you raped us, you separated us, you made us into slaves, you've cut off our head, put it in a jar and sent it back to, England to be studied. So what they did, they used their magic to curse the land. And that's exactly what I got in the reading. So it's a pointing of the stick, it's a pointing of the bone, it's a pointing of a frequency of energy that is directed at a location. That's their home. And it's like, well, if we can't live here and you're going to do this to us, then we're going to wreck the land that you live upon. The ground that you live upon will be cursed. And so that frequency that I got in the reading is the frequency of certain parts of WA, which is just hopelessness. There's no future. It's this feeling of like nothingness. It's empty. There's no love. There's no hope. There's no emotion. The people look dead in their eyes. They've got what I call the dead eyes. I'm not talking about the Gen Z stare, where they're just like dumb and they don't care. They don't have the connective skills to connect because they're living in the fucking internet world on the phone. That's not what I'm talking about. This is a frequency of very heavy tribal elder magic, and that frequency is a curse. All right, so once I did that reading and I conducted it, I knew after that I had to leave because there was no way out. There was no way one little occultist is going to come up against that level of magic and that level of power, because I was living on like a graveyard. That's the energy that I got. So I had to work out a way to get out. And as I did that, I would start to figure out a way to move on. Do you think that was easy to do? No. Suddenly, I'd be driving around and the car would break down. It was happening in objects. Yeah, it was happening. It was just all over the place. So yeah, zombie. I'd walk my dog. One night there was a man in the park and he had his hands in the park and he was just standing in the dark. And as I was walking my dog around, coming around a corner, I thought he was going to stab my dog. But yeah, it's Armadale. It is what it is. And I'm probably the only person that's actually going to be like brave enough to talk about this. But if you are an Aboriginal elder or an Aboriginal and you know about what happened, I'd love to know, just for curiosity purposes. I'm out of there. I'm safe. I got out of there as soon as I could. As soon as I could get myself away from that area, I did. The anger as well. There was a feeling of pure anger and hatred of fellow man, hatred of authority. Yeah, I know that this is horrible to hear, and it's like I just feel terrible for the people that are in it, but they probably don't know any different. That's all they know. But if you could only see and get out of there and go to other places outside of that environment, you would have to know the feeling. There's something very, very wrong here. And so I guess after all of the, attacks and all of the things that have happened in Armadale that happen there all the time, and I know it's probably getting better, it's probably the violence is going down, but I mean, all of that frequency is all part of it. It's like feeding off itself. It's like one of the things that I got shown when I was doing this little ritual, I was reaching out to the spiritual world to ask for a blessing and to ask so that I could leave and move on from that area, was actually I got shown the symbol of the Ouroboros. And I got a stick and I was sitting out in the dirt, because that's the frequency of the land, was just sitting in the backyard in the dirt. It's like all sand in WA. And I got this stick and I went into a little bit of free association with just pushing the stick around in the dirt, trying to make a shape or a symbol. And then later I'll come back, I'll photograph the symbol and try and look it up and look for it and work out what it was. Because when I'm trying to channel, it's like whatever comes through, it's more important that I just grab it and capture it and diarize it in that moment, because then I can unpack it later. That's what I'm like with a reading with my client. It's more about getting the information now than making it look pretty or aesthetically sounding right. Even this video might sound very raw, but it's the truth, right? So I drew this symbol and it was a snake eating its tail. Yeah, there was a snake eating its tail. So that's what I got. And it's like this cycle of this thing that's eating itself. And I just went, oh my fucking God. Of course, that means infinity as well, but I knew that I had to get out of there, and that's where I got out of there. And I'm still actually 6 months later, after getting out of there, I'm actually still kind of recovering from how bad it was spiritually, because it was so spiritually dark and filthy. Like it had a really grimy, filthy energy to it. The only other place I've ever felt anything like that was when I did have a vision to the lower astral, which I've diarized here on my channel. So you can go back and have a look. I did do a part 1 and part 2 of that. And there were very dark, foul smells around the area as well. So like rotting meat, dog shit, just the smell of decay. And I would say it's probably the smell of a lot of the souls that end up there that are decaying, that are in this state of atrophication, putrefaction. That's the smell of hell. So I don't know if this is going to upset people, but I'm just sharing this with you. That's my findings, and I wanted to share this story with you because it's interesting and it is the truth. And I'd just rather post something that is authentic and is my experience. If you've lived in a haunted house, I've lived in a haunted house. I've lived in a haunted space before. I have another story I'll share maybe if you're interested of a time I lived in. I lived in a house in Hyatt when I lived back in Melbourne, and it was a Greek woman's house, and her husband had passed away a few years just before I moved in. I think it might have even been a year or so before I moved in there, and a lot of paranormal activity was going on in the house because she was actually a Greek. I think she was either Orthodox. I'm not sure, but she was a very heavily religious woman. And then I moved into her house and was, all of my occult stuff and, very opposite to what she was, doing. So the house itself was actually like, this is a nunna that was making like jams and, relishes and, so it's like, there is a frequency, frequencies clash. And I actually had a dream where I was communicating with her in a dream, and she came to me. And after I'd been there for this is not in Armadale, by the way, this is just me summarizing another story. But she came to me in a dream, and I'd put a lot of love into that house. I cleaned it, I scrubbed it, I was renting it and painted the walls and, made a lot of love. I made that house feel like a home. And in a dream, she actually came to me and said, "Thank you for making this house a home, because what you've done for my house, my kids would never have done for this house, what you have done for this house." And she said to me that she doesn't follow, your way, my way, the way of the witch. But she said to me that she appreciated what I'd done, and I smiled and I said, "Thank you, and I appreciate that." But I also said to her, "It'll always be your house. I'm just staying here and living here, and thank you for having me, but you have to stop freaking out my dog because my dog will just sit in the corner and stare and bark. You have to stop that. You have to appreciate that I'm also allowed to live here, and I pay your kids to rent this place. So can we find a level of, cohesion here?" And what she said to me and what she showed me in the dream was that I was to buy a cross and hang it up in the lounge room for her. And so I said to her, "I'll see what I can do." So long story short, at the time I was involved with someone. And at the time that I had gone on a road trip out to Dalesford, actually. And I was in this secondhand shop with lots of trinkets and, like Vinnie's or the Salvos. And, it's got lots of cups and plates and clothes. And I love secondhand stuff. By the way, it's like lots of energies going on in secondhand places because it's all other people's stuff. And anyway, this is so wild, but this is just beside the point of Armadale. I'm just talking about this back in Melbourne. And I saw a painting of Jesus at the back of the shop, and it was framed, and it was Jesus of Nazareth, and he had this, the face. I'm not a religious person, by the way, so please don't think I was, interested in the religion aspect of this, but I could feel the frequency of that man. There was no judgment in that man's face. And I said to my friend, "That is a stunning painting. That is an art. Whoever made that painting is an artist that is fucking unreal." And for whatever reason, I actually couldn't afford it. I just couldn't get this painting. And I'm like, I don't know if I could have a painting of Jesus, but I remembered the dream of the nunna coming to me and saying that she wanted me to honor her and her house, and I was to get something of that nature. So I actually didn't buy the painting, and it was a couple of weeks later, I was seeing someone that came over to my house. Unfortunately, he was actually closeted and married with kids, like you can imagine. Yeah. Another story. Living the double life. And he actually said, I was on a road trip in Dalesford with my whoever, friend or insert made up word. And he came back and said, I've got you something. And before he pulled something out of the bag that he had in front of him, I said to him, it's a painting of Jesus, because I just knew. And he pulled out the painting of Jesus. Oh my God. And I said, you got that in Dalesford and you got it in this shop, and the painting was right at the back of the shop up against a wall on the windowsill. And he looked at me and his eyes just lit. Like, he couldn't believe it. He was shaking. He said, I need to sit down. I said, it's okay. I'm a psychic. I do this type of stuff. I do this all the time. It's not a big deal. He knew that I was that way inclined, but he couldn't, it's when you meet someone and, it's verified. To me, it's not a big deal, because like this type of stuff is my life. It's very real. But to him, I remember he was shaking and he wanted to leave because it was freaking him out. But yes, he felt compelled suddenly to buy the painting of Jesus for me to put into the house. So there you go. And so that was what it was. I would say would be her. It would have been the Nonna spirit. So I took the painting and thanked him for the gift, and I actually put it up above the railing of a doorway in the lounge room. So his painting was up on top of there, looking over the house. So interesting. But yeah, there you go. So there's another little story that I wanted to say. So different frequencies, obviously, when people come to me and they say, I'm not into any of this stuff. And I say, do you have a cross in your house? Do you have rosary beads? Do you have these items? You're already there. It's like, darling, you're already there, okay? You're already putting your antenna up to the spiritual world. You've got a cross. What do you think that cross is, okay? It's a conduit. All right, so there you go. There's a bit of a chat about the cursed Aboriginal land. When we go to certain places, we feel certain things and we get out of there. If it doesn't feel right, if it feels demonic, you get out of there, all right? Get the fuck out of there. But yes, residual energy is looking to host and occupy a person to recreate the thing that happened. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. But that's what was going on. It wasn't just the house, okay? It was the area. So lots and lots of love to you. Please leave your comments below. I'd love to hear them. I know this video has got very long. I didn't mean it to get this long, but it's interesting. So yeah, if you'd like to book me for an astrological chart reading or a spiritual counseling session, perhaps you've got a story like this you'd like to talk about with me and I can help you. It's always interesting. This stuff doesn't scare me, but I'm just sharing that it's very real. It's very much there. And it's not going to go away anytime soon. So yeah, may as well just deal with it and face it and talk about it, bring it out into the light so we can look at it and assess it. Lots and lots of love. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.